Welcome to the podcast. You know, there's legends and then there's Marc Guggenheim. And I want to say thank you for coming on this show. I've enjoyed your work on television so much, and your career has been so fascinating how it spanned everything from comic books to TV. You've worked with everybody in the industry, but you've got a book out called In Any Lifetime, and I was hoping we can talk about it.
I love that. Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words and the wonderful description. It's funny. I don't really think of myself as legendary, and in fact, I really wanted to come on the moderately successful Screenwriter Studio podcast. That's what I thought I was signing on for. So with the caveat that I'm not exactly qualified, to be talking on this podcast, it's great to be here.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so just walk me through, because I've read a little bit about In Any Lifetime. I know it's highly recommended. Guillermo del Toro raves about it, so obviously this is a good work of art. Walk me through a bit about the book, your approach to it, and let's go from there.
Yeah, it's funny. So this book I've been working on in some way, shape, or form, off and on, for the last 10 years. It's been
Oh
a
wow.
very long birthing process. And part of that was getting the story right. Part of that was finding the right partners. But a big part of it was also figuring out the medium. I originally thought about it as a screenplay.
Okay.
I then thought about maybe doing it as a graphic novel. And then when the pandemic hit and I suddenly had, there was lockdown and there was no production going on in television and
Right.
film, I suddenly had all this time on my hands and I decided, well, what if I wrote it as a novel? And what I discovered in that process was sort of really two things. Number one, I really enjoy prose. I have to say, writing this novel was probably one of the best
Yeah.
creative experiences of my life. I just really, truly enjoyed it. And the second thing was, this thing really just wanted to be a book. And it developed like this new life or this new vibrancy. I sort of use my screenplay version as kind of like what I call a super outline, where
Okay.
all the plot stuff had been worked out, and it freed me up, knowing that work was already done and was solid. It freed me up to be able to really focus on the characters and the prose, and really make each paragraph sing. And it was just a joyous experience. It's my second novel. I had
Okay.
written my first novel about close to 10 years prior, and there's I think the first novel it's fine. It's nothing spectacular. I think the idea turned out to be better than the execution.
You're so
It,
humble.
well, I try to be
It's
realistic.
fine.
To be honest with you, it is just fine. Honestly, it's nothing I'm proud of. This novel, In Any Lifetime, I'm actually legit proud of. There's stuff in there that I go, who wrote that? Because it certainly wasn't me.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
and in many ways, it sort of speaks to why I became a writer in the first place. I kind of discovered early on in my writing career that there were these great moments. I think all writers, have them. These great, wonderful moments where something comes out of you that you did not expect and you did not think was possible. And I really write for those moments. I
That's
write for those
awesome.
moments where I get to commune with someone smarter and more talented than me. And that is just that's the best. That's the best rush I can think of. This novel has a few of those. I was very, very lucky. And I'm really excited. I'm excited that it has gotten some really great early response from folks. Guillermo, of course, was very kind, as he always is. There's the publisher, Lake Union and Amazon, has been unbelievably supportive and incredibly just passionate about this book, and it's been wonderful. So I'm really looking forward to it getting out into the world.
So let's talk about like the book itself a little bit, because this is a new series, so this isn't a sequel to anything, right? It's
No,
a
it's
physicist
actually
is
original.
trying. Yeah, it's an original. So a physicist is trying to pretty much go through different universes to save the love of his life. Is that accurate?
Basically reunite with the love of his life. I would say, because basically this is a new take on the concept of the multiverse, which I have a
Okay.
little bit of experience in. Normally in multiverse, in many worlds theory, it's just every universe is completely different, and there's
Yeah.
universes where we where we're human but we've got horse heads and stuff, and
Right.
there's other things where everything's made of liquid. This idea is premised on the notion that actually the multiverse favors certain outcomes. So that's why, on every parallel Earth, there's oxygen and there's human
Hmm.
beings and there's technology. Um, and it basically, there's not a huge amount of difference between the various different universes, because it favors this certain, it tends towards this certain outcome. And where that makes the protagonist's life very difficult is he is searching for the one parallel universe where his deceased wife is still alive.
Wow.
So, in that respect, the way I sort of describe the novel is the antagonist is the universe itself. The universe is actively preventing the protagonist from finding his wife. And the universe does several things, to frustrate him in that regard. It throws a rival scientist in his wake. It throws a mercenary in his wake. It even throws another woman in his wake. And throughout the entire story, we are flashing back to the protagonist's courtship, romance, and ultimate marriage with his wife. So, and I did that because I wanted to, even though the wife dies in the first chapter, spoiler alert, I want to keep her literally alive throughout the entire story, because otherwise she's just an
Yeah.
idea, and I didn't
Right.
want our hero to be pursuing an idea. I wanted him to be pursuing a person. Um, so it's a little bit like, the way I sort of describe it is, it's half sort of thriller adventure story and half legit romance with parallel universes. I kind of describe it as, what if Christopher Nolan had written and directed The Notebook?
Oh,
Is my
wow.
and I sort of started off saying that really kind of in jest, but then the more people who read the novel with that log line in mind, the more came back to me. It's like, that's exactly what this is.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
so now, bear in mind, I don't know how much demand there's going to be for a Christopher Nolan drafted version of The Notebook, but the combination was a lot of fun for me. So I can only speak for myself.
So let's just kind of get to the basics of you kind of working this thing out in your head. So within any lifetime, you've got multiple timelines, you've got multiple realities. Are you sketching this thing out? Are you like, when I've done projects like this, I've done it. I've done multiple outlines, and then I actually took them and I reduced them over each other to see where they overlap. What was your process?
It's funny. My process for the novel was actually very similar to my process for anything else I write.
Okay.
I always start off writing notes longhand that I think if you were to read them and you were able to make sense of my handwriting, which you wouldn't be able to do, but if you could make sense of my handwriting, it would look like the ravings of a madman, because it's basically me having a conversation with myself. So it's a lot of like questions and answers and striking things out and drawing lines and arrows to, no, move this over here and move that over there. And that slowly, again, still longhand, that slowly evolves into something like an outline.
Okay. Yeah.
And in the case of In Any Lifetime, I realized I needed two outlines. I needed an outline for the present day story, but then I needed an outline for the romance. And I guess you can take sort of the screenwriter out of Hollywood, but you can't take the Hollywood out of the screenwriter, because I still, no matter what form I'm working in, I always still think in terms of a 3-act structure.
Of course.
And the end of the second act, which is always your emotional low point, um, in the novel, that there's an emotional low point. There's an end of a second act for the romance, of course, and there's
Hmm.
an end of the second act for the present day story. And those two chapters like go right next to each other in the novel. And it was funny. One of the nicest compliments I got was my editor, was like, "Is this intentional that both low points are coming right after each other?" I'm like, "Yes, it's totally by design. Thank you for noticing." Like, I really wanted the present and the past talking to each other, and
That's cool.
I'm not like a super structuralist in terms of
Okay.
first, second, and third acts, but I like them. There to me, like structuralism is kind of like the seat warmer in a car. I don't think it's why no one is buying the car for the seat warmers. No one is seeing a movie or a TV show or reading a book for the structuralism. But it's really nice when you nail it,
That's
and no
awesome.
one's complaining, about the seat warmers. So so that's and the outline, I originally worked with, again, sort of became the super outline, which was sort of like the screenplay. Um, but I always write outlines with the option of deviating from them. In fact, I don't think
Oh, I love that.
I don't think I've ever written anything that was exactly like the way it was outlined. I always
Yeah.
discover something new, and that's because like you're telling a story, but an outline's not telling a story. An outline is describing a story, and there's a world of difference between those two things. And a description of a story is all well and good. It's like it's like you see a movie and you come home and you tell your friend about this great movie you just saw. That's a description. That's really what all an outline is. It's in the telling of the story, actually seeing or reading the way the story is depicted, that to me is where all the magic happens.
Yeah.
Um, so I always end up deviating from my outlines. In the case of Ending a Lifetime, some of the deviations were pretty significant. There were like whole sequences that
Oh,
were
really?
added. There were whole sequences that were dropped. Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's even before I got into sort of the editing and revision process. That's just, to me, that's part of the organic way that I work.
So when you're working on this and you're working this thing out and you've got it structured all the way out and you're feeling really confident about it, do you find yourself like thematically like thinking about what am I trying to say with this thing?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I ever felt confident. I
Okay.
don't think I ever feel confident. Like I never approached anything really with any level of confidence. In fact, the way I always know when I know I've reached the midpoint of
Hmm.
whatever it is, because that's usually that's my lowest point. It's not the end of the second act. It's the middle of the thing, and I'm like, oh my god, am I just wasting my time? This is a disaster. Or if it's a work for hire gig, I'm like, I should get back the money. But it's
Awesome.
funny. I theme is actually something that I strive for. Like
Yeah.
I always feel I fall short of it for the most part. Like I think in terms of theme, because I was an English major, way back in the day, and I do come to things with an ambition for theme and an aspiration towards theme, but I always feel like my realities or what I end up producing falls short of that, aspiration. In the case of In Any Lifetime, it really the theme is more a question. And I will say, like a lot of my work, looking back on it, I tend to be more attracted to themes of question than themes that provide an answer. But
Okay.
the theme and the question in Any Lifetime is it possible to love someone too much?
Oh,
Um,
wow.
because in this in this story, Jonas, the protagonist, he's literally trying to defy the will of the universe all out of
Yeah.
love. And there are plenty of people in the book who are like, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe it's not a good idea for you. Maybe it's not a good idea even for the universe. Is it possible to love someone too much? Which
Wow.
I just think is a very powerful, very romantic, very interesting concept. And I think it sort of speaks to why I'm attracted to questions of theme as opposed to answers of theme.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't know, I've always been the kind of writer and really the kind of consumer of media, of consumer of entertainment. I'm far more interested in questions than answers, and I'm far more interested in stories that make me think and make me ask questions that tell me what the answer is. And I think as a writer, that's kind of what I found myself gravitating towards. So I don't really answer. I mean, obviously the story has an ending,
Right.
but I don't know if I fully answer the question: is it possible to love someone too much? I really want the reader to put the novel down. Only after they finished it, please. Put the novel down and go. Okay, now I have to think about this, and I have to think about this in my own relationships, and sort of think about it from a philosophical perspective.
It's such a brilliant approach to a theme, though, is asking an open question like that. It allows you more room to play,
I
and
think it
you're
does
blowing my
too.
mind right now.
It's funny. My very first professional writing gig was working on a show called The Practice, which was created by David Kelly, who did Big Little Lies and Ally McBeal and a gajillion other things.
Mm,
And he's one of the most brilliant TV writers ever. And The Practice was a law show, and
hmm
typically we would when we would have civil cases, cases that weren't criminal, we would typically ask David, what do you want the verdict to be? How do you want the story to end? And he would always tell us, I don't care. Like, as long as both sides are being argued with equal conviction and with equal persuasiveness, the verdict is insignificant to me. I think it was really that professional experience that really ignited in me this notion of, yeah, you know what, it's the answer is not important if the question is discussed in the most fulfilling way possible,
amazing.
where and it really is it to me it excites me as a writer in the same way it excites me as an audience member.
I mean, this is why I do the show, is to get nuggets like this from legends like yourself. Anybody listening to this, man, take that and run with it, because it is really, it will open your mind when you're thinking about theme. Like I'm myself, I can see myself thinking about a project I'm working on right now, and where you talk about being at the midpoint, you're at your lowest. I'm like, I'm literally at the midpoint now, and I was thinking that it's like, do I need to give the money back?
It's the worst. It's the worst. It is terrible. It is always the longest, darkest night of the soul. And
Yeah.
you just, I always tell everyone it's normal. It's, probably responsible and professional. Just keep soldiering forth. But yeah, and now I almost sort of laugh at it when I can. Like, I'm like, okay, must be at the halfway mark.
That's so funny.
It's definitely tricky.
This has been an incredible interview. Before I let you go, I like to hit you with my final question, which is there anything I didn't ask you which I should have?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Well, you didn't ask me when the book's coming out, and I would
Fair
love to
enough.
tell people when the book's coming out. So it's coming out on August 1st.
Okay.
It'll be available. It's an Amazon publisher, so you can order it on Amazon. It'll be available, as a hard copy, in paperback. It'll be available on Kindle, of course, and also on Audible as an audiobook.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah, and also independent bookstores as well. So you can find it hopefully anywhere you get your books. And Yeah, that apart from that, no, I can't think of. Apart from a crass plug of the book, I can't think of anything.
All right, let me bump off of that then. Do you see anything happening with this book in the future as far as your time in television, or possibly trying to, make it adapted into a feature?
It's funny. Like whenever I work in, comics, or I do creator owned comics, or now in prose. That's always a question, because that's a question I think for every writer
Right.
of comics and prose, because we live in this world which I do not like, where the producers and the studios have what I call an IP fetish.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
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 I'm actually not fully supportive of that. That being said, it is the world we live in. And if someone were to want to turn it into something, I'd be like, oh, that'd be lovely. I'd love to see it get a second life. I actually I kind of see it as, I think it would make for a really good movie. And I know someone who I'd like to see write it.
Aw.
Uh, Not me, not me. I mean, the thing about me is people are always asking me, like, my agents usually are asking me, like, well, do you want to adapt this? And I'm like, generally speaking, I'm like, I don't need to. I've already told the story. I've scratched the itch.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm working on something now that would be a TV version of a graphic novel I wrote. I've written, the feature version of another graphic novel, Too Dead to Die. I'm not opposed to adapting my own stuff, but I also have no great desire to. Um, it's very interesting actually because I've spent so much of my career adapting other people's material and
Right.
sort of saying like uh, when you transfer a story from medium X to medium Y, it's not going to be a faithful translation
Right.
because you want to tack away from the weaknesses of medium Y and play X and play to the strengths of medium Y. And when I started adapting my own stuff, I realized, okay, well, now you're getting hoisted on your own petard. The rubber's meeting the road here. Are you gonna walk the talk, or have you been lying to yourself and everyone else all these years? And it's an interesting exercise. But anyway, I digress. But like, yeah, I think that, like I said, at the very beginning of the interview, I contemplated several different,
Yeah.
creative mediums for this story. So I think this story could live in any number of different
Yeah.
mediums. And it's always fun. It's always fun to sort of see your kid grow up and, go off to college, or go off and do something unexpected. So that would be fun. But it's not for me, it's not the be all end all. For me, the be all end all is getting the story out there, especially after
Yeah.
10 years, and having it find an audience of any size.
What I love about this is that the purity of your intent with it is like, I want to write a book. I'm going to write the best version of this book I can, and then that's it. And I think that's amazing. There are a lot of writers that will write a book with the intent of creating a new IP to make a film, which is fine. I mean, that's the way to do it too. But to just be like, no, this is what I wanted it to be, and this is what it is. But if it has to be something else, I'm fine with that too. There's purity there. I love that. Thank you so much for being on the show.
No, I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.